everybody, welcome to Tea Time with Ruthmere today. So today we are actually having a really cool topic. We are going to have Mark Doddington, our membership coordinator, and he is going to be doing a little talk on his personal glass collection. It's called Murano glass. So I'm going to switch over to him now.
Hello, welcome to the 1903 Wilson Wilbert Wilt House. And as Dree mentioned, I'm going to be talking about my collection of Murano Italian art glass. A little bit of history on Murano. Murano itself is actually a collection of small islands just off the coast of Venice at the northern end of the Adriatic Sea. Originally it was part of the Venetian Republic. Italy as a country did not exist until about 1861. Prior to that it was a collection of principalities and republics, all independently governed. And they all finally fused together into one country in 1861, and the Venetian Republic was one of those in the far northeastern corner. As for the Murano glass itself, Venice has always been a center of glassmaking for at least 1,000 years now. But in 1291, the rulers of Venice decided that this was just becoming a little bit too much of a fire hazard with all the wooden buildings, so glassmakers were literally forced to leave the city itself and move into the outlying islands, where they established a thriving colony of glass artists and artisans that's still thriving to this very day. Now, the nice thing about Murano is the history of it is long but very simple. Since the move out there in 1291, virtually nothing has changed. Glassmakers became some of the most aristocratic people in the Venetian Republic. By the 14th century, they were granted supreme status as citizens, often intermarrying with the wealthiest and most powerful families in the village. As a consequence, they were also granted immunity from most prosecutions. The only restriction that was imposed on them was that they were not actually allowed to leave the Venetian Republic for fear of taking their glassmaking secrets to other countries. Some of them, of course, did leave and established glassworks throughout Europe, most notably in Poland, France, and Ireland. But the vast majority of them stayed in Venice and continued working there. Those that did remain eventually formed a guild, practically copyrighting the name Murano so that any piece of glass that came out of that group of islands would be very specifically labeled and designated Murano, and only artists that worked under that blanket clause could use the name Murano to describe their pieces. The oldest remaining glass factory in the Murano island chain today is known as Pauli & Company, Compagnia Venezia Murano, founded in 1866. And they are one of dozens, if not hundreds, of factories that are in production to this day. Many of the most popular techniques used in glass blowing were invented in Murano over the 700-year period that they've been on these islands, and I'm going to demonstrate a few of these on the table as you've seen Dree panning over. I have about 30 pieces of Murano on this table. This is about a third of my collection, representing some of the more eclectic pieces and all of the major techniques.
Not this one. This is this is my tea.
The first technique I want to talk about is known as bullicante, also known as controlled bubbles. As you can see in this candy dish, the bubbles are arranged in rows. These are actually put in there by injecting air pockets into the molten glass with a syringe. You arrange them, inject them in nice rows to get even bubbles, and then as you shape the piece, twist it around, mold it, the bubbles stretch out into more elliptical shapes. The straight lines become more spiraled around, and you get these fancy designs.
It's very cool. And you have quite a few pieces here that have that technique, like this one right in front of me.
Yes, it's one of the most common techniques in Murano glassmaking.
That one over there.
And of course, a lot of techniques have been adopted by other glassmakers throughout the world. The next technique I want to talk about is called sommerso, which is Italian meaning submerged. And that's a technique that makes a piece of glass appear to be submerged in water, quite literally. One of the best examples I have is this beautiful Murano perfume bottle from the 1980s.
It's enormous.
Yes, as you can see, it's got 3 graduated shades of green glass surrounded by this extremely thick layer of clear glass.
Now, how heavy is that?
13 pounds.
13 pounds.
I actually put it on a postage scale just to see.
Oh my gosh. And you said, I asked you before, so they actually did sell perfume in this bottle at some point.
Perfume was an invention, well, Murano perfume, I should say, was an invention of the 1960s or 70s. They didn't start making perfume until late in the 20th century.
Right.
And yeah, if you look at the bottle, you can see this inner part shaped like a bell pepper. That's where the actual perfume was, and then all this surrounding it is just solid glass.
Right. So I imagine if you went out of your way to buy this particular bottle of perfume, it probably would have been a pretty penny.
I can imagine so.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. I paid $65 just for the bottle without the perfume.
Yeah. It's very pretty, though.
Thank you. The next technique is known as avventurina, and this is another one of the most popular techniques in Murano glassmaking. Yeah, you heard that. Have this beautiful ribbon piece. Avventurina is basically metal flakes, copper, gold, or silver, that are worked into the glass. And I have several examples of that on this table as well. You can see some examples in the pig here. And this piece right in front that I call the Octopus has silver flecks sandwiched between layers of green and amber glass. Now, the way you do avventurina is you lay out a piece of gold foil or silver foil or whatever it is you want to use.
Motorcycle.
Heard a lot of that. And then you take the hot gather of glass, roll it over that layer of foil so that the foil sticks to the glass. And then as you stretch it and heat it, that solid sheet of foil breaks into thousands of tiny pieces that then get distributed all throughout the glass. The more you pull it, the farther apart they will spread. And then you seal it all together by adding another layer of glass. And again, in this case here, the amber glass was laid down first with controlled bubbles in it. Then the silver flakes were added and the green layer on top. And then a thin layer of clear sommerso glass to hold the whole thing together.
I can see why you call it the Octopus.
Yes.
So, yeah, you told me that this one here has the same technique, yeah?
Yes.
And it's very sparkly.
That one has copper flakes in it. And this one here that I call the Galaxy, that has gold flakes.
Oh. So these all have different uses, but again, Murano is probably not something you would actually use as like a dinner dishware. It's more for decor. It's
very decorative. Sometimes it's practical. Certainly back in the 700s and up through at least the mid-20th century, it was probably more functional than decorative. But with the 1960s, it became very much an expression of pure creativity.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that this is used for anything. You're a nice tall one. No, not that one.
The ribbon there. Yeah, no, that is pure decoration.
That one you could use as a vase, probably. But
yeah, you probably use that one as a vase. I call that the splash.
And then this one is definitely not. You probably couldn't put much in there. But
again, maybe a votive candle or something in the base.
Yeah,
because the hollowed out part is only about 2 inches deep.
And you said you called this one
the lyre.
Lyre, yes.
Lyre.
Yes. That is a very cool shape, and it looks like a whiskey bottle or some sort to me.
The next technique is one of the most complicated, called Millefiori, which is Italian for 1,000 flowers.
Millefiori.
Millefiori.
I'll leave it to you.
And that is accomplished, first of all, by forming the flowers themselves. Now, I do have another piece here. This is not Murano. This is actually Saint Louis. But you can see it has all these glass flowers inside it. And the way you do that is by taking flat glass rods, arranging them in a pattern so that you get a design inside. Sometimes it can be just flower shapes like those. You can have silhouettes of animals or people. I've even seen words and numbers made in these glass rods, and you fuse all of that together into a solid rod, cut it into small slices that you arrange on the base of your piece, and then you layer heavy layers of clear glass over it, which actually magnify the flowers themselves. So again, if you look at this one on the top, the flowers appear quite large, but when you tilt it over, they're really quite small.
So they are. That is such a cool, and I know we have one of these very similar. I know it's not Murano, but we have one in the Ruthmere collection that's in AR's library as well. So next time you come for a tour, you can keep an eye out for that as well.
One other technique that I want to mention, known as cangiante, which means changing, and that is the process of iridizing glass so that it has a rainbow effect. This beautiful bowl over here is a prime example. You can see the iridescent colors in there and that big glowing ball of light in the middle, which I call the heart. And the iridizing of glass is accomplished by coating the raw glass with metal salts and then superheating those so that those rainbow colors come out. And those literally become fused inside the glass.
That's really cool.
And with this one, no matter what angle you look at it from, that big glowing ball of light is always there.
It is.
And at the right angle, it takes on this beautiful sort of turquoise color.
It looks like the sun. Very cool.
Most Murano, as I said, in the early days probably was more functional than decorative. And then with the advent of the 60s and the hippie culture and the free love movement and such, rules just kind of went out the window. And along with that came a complete free-form movement, such as this piece here that I call the Splash.
And I love it.
And this is one of my
cool.
favorites too. Geometry was forbidden, absolutely forbidden in Murano glassmaking. It was all about organic, free, natural forms.
Yeah, you can definitely tell just by sweeping across this table that none of these are, you know, typical, like not even a circle.
No. The most conventional would be that paperweight there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's another technique that we talked about earlier today. I wasn't originally going to mention it, but I might as well since we're on the subject. That's a technique known as lamp work. All those flower petals in there are thin bits of glass that are just superheated and then stretched out into their final shape, and then the huge gather of clear glass is put around it to seal it all together. And you can see that one has two enormous controlled bubbles in the middle, forming the center of the flower.
That's very cool.
Sometime during the 60s or 1970s, Murano developed a rage for animal figures, and I've got four of them actually on the table right here. The ladybug right here, this is my most recent piece. I just added that about a week ago.
I love his goofy eyes.
Yeah, I've been admiring that piece at the antique mall down the street for months now, so I'm glad it was still there. The Millefiori Pig is another prime piece that I got from the same vendor, as a matter of fact.
Very cute.
One of my favorites is the Holstein cow here.
That's cool.
And the frog that you were admiring earlier. I also have in my collection a polar bear, a teddy bear, a rabbit, a swan, and another pig.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. As he said before, this is only about a third of all of the Murano glass that he has. So this is a very impressive and beautiful collection.
I can't resist. It's an addiction.
You've probably got me hooked too, because I'm going to be looking for these all over the place now.
Well, the very first piece I ever acquired was this one that I call the Ocean Wave. It's an ashtray with the controlled bubbles in it. And I've enhanced it by adding a few random seashells to go along with that beautiful aquamarine color. I got this. I got this at an antique store up in Edwardsburg, and the husband and wife that owned it became good friends of mine, and she was very informative, educating me on Murano and a lot of other antiques. Her name is Mary Beth, and I thank her for the knowledge that she gave me and the addiction that she gave me.
Yep.
Here's another extreme piece that I love, this Conch Shell, which has the sommerso on it and multi-layered, multicolored glass inside. And again, this is just a great example of the crazy, chaotic, free-form, don't you love that sound?
Yeah.
The crazy free-form styling that came about with Murano.
Yeah, it has a very organic feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
So this one here, you mentioned before that this one is not Murano, correct? Or you don't believe it is.
Right, it was labeled as Murano in the antique store, but does not have any of the classic Murano traits other than its general freeform shape. It doesn't have the sommerso, it doesn't have the bullacante or the Aventurino. And you can go ahead and lift that up if you want to show the bottom of it.
Yeah.
One of the telltale signs of Murano pieces is a flat polished base. Well, that one has a very heavily textured base as opposed to this one here. You can see the base is flat and very smoothly polished.
Indeed you do.
So that's one of the things to look for other than the obvious. I mean, some pieces are just labeled Murano, especially the newer pieces from the 70s beyond have labels on them. Otherwise, it's just a matter of learning what to look for.
Right.
And
so are there certain companies, do you know of, that specialize in Murano, or is it pretty much just individual glass makers for the most part?
as I said, Murano itself is like a colony of glass makers.
Okay.
About, I don't know, anywhere up to maybe 150 at any given time, operating in the small chain of islands. They're all independent glass makers, but they all market their product under the blanket term Murano. But in order to use that term, they have to be a licensed glassblower resident in the Murano Island cluster.
So it is possible some people have, taken the technique and they call it Murano, but it might not actually be,
It is possible, certainly, yes.
Yeah.
None of these techniques is a secret anymore. They have all been disseminated throughout the world.
I mean, if you have the ability to do this.
Which I don't.
Right. So it's gorgeous. All right. Well, did you have anything else to add about the Murano itself?
I don't think so. I'd love to know if anybody out there has any questions.
Yeah. Do absolutely feel free to ask us any questions about Mark's collection. And you also didn't mention, so you'll notice we're not in Ruthmere today. What is this house called?
This is the Wilson Wilbert Wilt House, built in 1903. Wilson Wilt was the founder of Wilt's Grocery Stores, which went on to become a semi-national supermarket chain.
There you go. Okay, so that's where we are today, and there's a very gorgeous chandelier up there that Mark said he put together.
Yeah, that was a do-it-yourself kit.
But I mean, it's amazing. It looks like something. It looks very similar to our chandelier at the Havilah Beardsley house. So, good job putting that together.
Thank you.
So, are there any other pieces in this room that you like? I mean, it doesn't have to be Murano, but any you'd like to point out?
There were several that we were talking about earlier. The decanter and wine glasses on top of the knick-knack shelf there. Those are Italian, but they're not Murano. Those date to about the 1960s.
Okay.
And you can see they have a beautiful amber glass with a gold and silver overlay on top.
Yeah, that is really cool how they did that. Do you know how they did the overlay? I'm not familiar with glass techniques.
It's done similar to the way the appliques are done on Wedgwood. It's, just very gently laid on there and fused to the glass after the glass itself has been shaped and cooled.
Okay. That's very interesting. And then we were talking about these pieces up here as well. Did you want to talk about any of these?
Sure. Going from left to right, that beautiful green vase up there is Blanco in a design known as crackle glass.
Crackle glass.
Yeah, you can see it looks like it's been shattered into thousands of little pieces.
How do they do that?
Well, you take the warm piece of glass and you submerge it in cold water, and that cracks the surface literally. And then you add another layer of molten glass over that to seal the whole thing together.
That's very cool.
And then you crimp it and shape it as that one's been done into its final form.
Kind of fan, yeah.
Let it cool over a period of 12 to 24 hours, and that solidifies the whole thing, keeping that crackled effect submerged inside the glass, but effectively still fused together as one solid piece.
Very cool.
That purple vase up there, I admit I know absolutely nothing about. I think it might be Bavarian, but I'm not certain. I just liked it.
Yeah, it blends in with these others. So if you recognize this style, do let us know, because I'm sure Mark would love to know what it is if you know.
Oh, definitely. I love to talk about my glassware.
Yeah, he's our resident glass expert.
The next one up there is completely man-made. Has metallic flecks in there, which I'm pretty sure are copper. And the blue and green coloring in there are pigmented dyes of some sort that are applied to whatever the base material is. I think it might be jasper, but I'm not certain. Okay. As I said, it's completely man-made, not an antique by any means. I bought that about 2 years ago, brand new.
Well, it's gorgeous.
It is a beautiful piece, thanks. And that one over there is Fenton, which is one of the most popular collectible glass makers in America.
Yes, I've definitely seen these around, especially I think my grandma has one.
Oh, just about anybody that has any interest in collectible glass has Fenton.
Yes, you can see he has all sorts of, Mark is definitely an antiquer, so all sorts of very cool things. All right, anything else you wanted to add, Mark?
I think that pretty much covers it, except that we haven't talked about our tea yet.
We haven't talked about our tea, of course not. Yeah, I should have mentioned that at the beginning, but what kind of tea are you having today, Mark?
Drinking orange pico.
Orange pico. Yummy. And I'm having spice chai, which if you've been watching before, you know that I have this almost every time. It's one of my favorites. So, yeah, so let us know what kind of tea you guys are having. We love to hear that you guys are joining us for tea time. So. Oh, and these are actually Mark's little teacup glasses as well, not Murano, but no. But they're very cute little antiques too. So, all right, please do let us know in the comments if you guys have any questions for Mark. And then next week, of course, we will be continuing tea time. I think that next week, it's going to be quilt squares for beginners with Carolyn Bonanno. Our communications coordinator. One thing to know about that one is that it's not going to be a live video. She actually pre-recorded it. So when you do find that video, it's going to be just on our feed. You won't be able to interact with us or anything, unfortunately, but that's going to be the only one that's like that. So, all right, thank you again so much for tuning in, and you guys have a wonderful day.